top of the hour, so we'll get started, and I'll keep monitoring our attendee list just to make sure to keep adding people. But welcome everyone to our next level prospecting workshop. Today we plan on going through 3 ways to really advance your overall grant strategy. Kind of going through some must-dos to different time-saving strategies that we've seen be successful over time, as well as some kind of advanced tips and tricks, especially when thinking about invite-only funders. To people that are just jumping in here, would love for you to share in the chat, kind of while you're waiting, what your name, what organization you're coming from, and your title and role. And as this workshop is going on, we fully plan to have this chat open and live and interactive. So feel free to use this as a way to engage with each other, as well as us. We'll be monitoring that as we go. But excellent, seeing some familiar faces. Welcome, Zach. Well, great. Appreciate everyone kind of sharing in the chat. As new people arrive, continue to do that as well. But we'll run through quick introductions of ourselves. So my name is Joe Sullivan. I'm one of our onboarding strategists here at Instrumentl. Have been working at Instrumentl for about 6 months now, and I've been working with both large and small nonprofits, as well as freelance grant writers and consultants to help onboard them onto their platform, help them through thinking about different grant writing strategies, and ensure their success with Instrumentl, as well as their grant work as a whole. I come with 2 years background in working in tech sales and onboarding. So that's kind of my main focus outside of just the actual strategy of grant writing itself. And a quick fun fact about me, my name is Joseph O'Rourke Sullivan, so very Irish Catholic, come from a big family. My mom's side alone, she's the 9th of 10, and we have over 100 relatives with aunts, uncles, cousins, and cousins' kids, all on the O'Rourke side.
Awesome. My name is Karen. I'm also an onboarding strategist here at Instrumentl. I'm seeing some familiar names, so welcome everyone. My background is actually in fundraising, and so I spent several years mainly in university fundraising, and most recently, prior to Instrumentl, I was the prospect researcher for corporate and foundation relations at UC Berkeley. And so a lot of the things that I will be teaching today and sharing with you all is going to be based on my personal experience and things that I've learned over the past several years in my fundraising career. So fun fact about myself, I started playing the piano at 6. And so I like to think that I'm pretty musical, but it's also been about 6 years since I've touched or played the piano. So hopefully that'll, I will get back into that sooner rather than later. So yeah, again, if you're coming in late, feel free to enter in your name and or your organization into the chat, and we'd love to welcome you. All right, so I'm going to jump in. Just want everyone to know, make sure you stay until the end, because we will be sharing a special freebie and a discount for our new Instrumentl Plus plan, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. So don't miss out on that. Also, if you have any questions, they can be added into the chat. Please add your questions with 3 hashtags in front so that we can see them more easily. And I noticed that I just launched a poll, which we'll get to later. But thank you for those who are answering the poll. And also wanted to note that this presentation is being recorded, and we'll be sending everyone a copy of our slides afterwards.
Awesome. So today we plan on covering a number of topics, from prospect research, the must-dos, to some more advanced strategies during the first half of this workshop. During the second half, we will actually dive into Instrumentl and talk about how to utilize the strategies that we've talked about in the first half within the platform itself. So let's jump in. Our game plan today, we're again first going to talk about just the overview of prospecting research as a whole, the what, the why, and the how, really just a level set on the overarching idea and why we believe all grant strategies should start kind of from a strategic prospect research mentality. We'll then dive into prospecting strategies itself. So the must-dos to some more advanced strategies. And then the latter half will actually be working in Instrumentl for all current subscribers or people that have had an account with us before. We will activate your account again so that you can get back into a 2-week trial with us. If you're new to Instrumentl, we'll actually have a link for you to set up an account and activate that as well. And then I'll be going through an Instrumentl walkthrough with our new fall 21 features to show you how to put the strategies that we talk about into practice. And last, we'll end with a quick Q&A to make sure that everyone leaves here learning something new and is confident about how to take advantage of these strategies.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so if you guys haven't already noticed, there was a poll going on that I had launched. What is your biggest challenge when it comes to grants? And, Joe and I hear and talk to nonprofits and consultants like you all every day. And so we hear a lot of these challenges. If you're not seeing something in the answers or in the choices here, please go ahead and actually share in the chat as well, because we'd love to hear any other ideas or thoughts when it comes to grants and other challenges that you face. So yeah, looks like I got some good results in here. I'm going to share this poll. I'm going to give a few more seconds for any stragglers to come in and answer this poll. Awesome. So I'm going to share the results here. It looks like, the biggest challenge is finding funders, right? And not maybe being unsure of how to find the right opportunities. Yes, this is very common. And I had a lot of these issues as well, whether it's not, I just don't know the landscape, or it was difficult just to target the ones that really matched me geographically. The second one is going to be bandwidth, right? And that's also very common, especially if you're wearing many different hats and you just don't feel like you have the time to prospect. Not seeing ROI, so not being able to, or applying for grants, but not being successful. And that's, also a challenge. And it can be very frustrating when you are sending out a lot of applications, you're not really seeing it come back. And then also we have no grant strategy. So maybe you're just getting started and you don't know where to start, as well as disorganization. So maybe you're finding it difficult to have to organize all of your work in one place. So thank you everyone for answering that poll. Next, I'm going to jump into some other scenarios as well to kind of mirror these poll results. So go ahead and raise your hand with the reaction if any of these scenarios resonate with you. So first of all, maybe you're just getting started. Maybe you're funding a new program, or you're not familiar with funders within a specific subject area. Or perhaps you're a consultant and you're working with a new nonprofit where the geographic location is completely new to you and you don't know any of the funders in that community. Or maybe you feel overwhelmed because you wear many different hats and you just don't have the time to prospect research. And that's also very common. And prospecting, and we'll show you today, and we'll talk more about how to leverage your time. Lastly, maybe you have done prospecting. Maybe you've gone into it and now you have a gigantic list of prospects and you just don't know what to do next. So these are all scenarios that, yeah, I can see Amanda. Thank you. And
Melissa, looked like that resonated with you as well.
Yeah, awesome. Joe has his hand up. But yeah, these are all really, these are challenges that we all face. I face them as well when I was doing a lot of my grants prospecting and just not feeling like everything was coming together. And I was very just in different places, right? Whether it was thinking about different prospects or just trying to align my time or trying to prioritize. These are things that we're going to be talking about today. And so with some of those scenarios that we just talked about, I guess I want you all to recognize, and you might already know this, that you're not alone, right? You can see that we all kind of go through the same thing. And so today we'll be talking about prospect research because simply by being more strategic with prospect research, this is going to help you with all those different challenges. And so with that, I'm going to pass it off to Joe to talk a little bit more about prospect research.
Yeah, so definitely just want to focus very high level at first before we dive into some of these deeper strategies about just prospect research in general, the what, why, and how of prospect research. So start off, what is prospect research? And when you boil it down, prospect research is the process of finding, assessing, and qualifying opportunities and doing that strategically. And I really want to emphasize strategically because creating a plan is going to be crucial to writing grants. It's really not just a numbers game. It's not like just sales. And I know some people have that mindset. You really want to think strategically about who you're going after. Are they a good fit? And why you're actually thinking about reaching out to certain funders. And all this can be done using public information. Data and insights, using this data and insights, you definitely want to prioritize which funders to approach. And then why prospect researching? Because, as the great Michael Scott once said, you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. But to even further that, you need to make sure that you're focused on the right goal and the shots that you are taking are in the right domain of kind of the funders and the programs that you're looking to fundraise for. This will really help you maximize your efforts, which will then lead to more successful grant applications and better foundation relationships. And another reason why we prospect research is really just to save time. I know I saw a few people answer bandwidth as a big challenge for them, as well as wearing multiple hats. And being strategic with your prospect researching will help you prioritize funding opportunities that are actually going to be more efficient for you and lead to more successful grant applications. And then how to prospect research. So you can create a plan in a number of ways, all through publicly available information. And we'll dive into this information later and where you can actually find that. But looking at funder interests and priorities is going to be the fastest way to know if a funder aligns with your programs and your mission. And after assessing the funder as a whole, look at their active grant opportunities and the requirements for their application. Are you eligible to actually apply for this grant? And going back to what I said before, do you have the bandwidth to actually apply depending on how long the application process actually is itself? And funder assets are and giving can be found through their 990 information. And this is going to be a great way to really just look and make sure, is a funder still actively giving to organizations, and are they actively giving in your category? The last two bullet points can also be found within funder 990s, but also when thinking about key individuals, that can also be sometimes found on a foundation's website. We'll go into more detail later about how to leverage this information. But if you have a connection with an organization, it is always important to reach out and make that connection and see if anyone at your organization has those ties, because again, to my point before, it's not a numbers game. It is a relationship game at the end of the day. So the more connected a foundation can feel to your mission, the more likely they are to continue to give. And the last thing that you can use to look at are just a list of past grantees. And we'll dive in about how useful this is going to be down the road.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. So I'm going to dive into prospect research strategies. And so just wanted to give a lay of the land. We're going to be going through three different parts. I'll be starting with the must-dos. Joe will be talking about more time savers. And then lastly, I will be going through next level strategies. I'm seeing some questions already about how to approach invitation-only funders, and I'm going to be covering that as well in our third part. So I'm going to start off with the must-do. So who in here might be just getting started with grant writing, or maybe you're new in your role, or you're thinking about funding a new program or project? Go ahead and raise your hand if that applies to you. And so perhaps you're thinking to yourself, I'm just getting started. Where do I begin? Yes, Pamela, I see anyone who's new here. We're probably thinking the same thing, right? How do I get started? So I'm going to provide 4 introductory tips to get you started. I will run through all of these in detail. So number 1, brainstorming terms and keywords to look out for. Number 2, breaking down your search into individual specific searches. Number 3, thinking about immediate gut checks. And number 4, creating a grants calendar. So number 1, brainstorming key terms to search and look out for when reviewing funder priorities or interest areas. And so with this piece of advice, I just want you to be able to set up a good foundation of ideas and framing around your program or your project. even before you dive into the search, right? And so I'm going to use an example today where I'm looking for tutoring for an after-school program for high school students to receive mentoring and assistance and tutoring assistance. And so, right off the bat, this is the easy part, right? I have some terms that I'm already thinking about: after school, tutoring, high school. I'm going to be using these terms to search. And you can kind of think about this if anyone's familiar with like first order thinking versus second order thinking. This is going to be our first order thinking, right? And then next, I encourage you to think outside the box. So think about outcomes and objectives and specific program components. And that's going to help you brainstorm some more terms that you might not have actually thought of initially. So in my case, I'm going to be thinking about terms like maybe educational access and equity, right? Because that's going to be hopefully an outcome of this program in reaching students in underserved areas or students that do not have the assistance or mentoring that they need. Also, maybe some of the curriculum is going to be dealing with career prep or college prep, right? And then lastly, I'm thinking about, okay, who are the tutors in this instance, right? And I'm going to pretend like these tutors are going to be college students. And so I want to bring in the component around youth development and leadership to think about bringing leaders into this and college leaders into this to help tutor some of the high schools. So again, hopefully this will jog your mind a little bit, and this is just a warm up, but it'll help you think of some new ideas around your search. Which leads me into my second part, breaking down your search into different buckets. So you might be very tempted to have all those terms in your, all right, I'm going to jump in and start researching, but I want you to take a step back because I don't want you to overwhelm yourself with one gigantic search. And so taking back that example about this tutoring program, maybe I want to start with just the core programming, right? The bread and butter, let's look for funders that are going to support after school programs or educational access. And then you can create a secondary search, other searches that maybe you are prioritizing later around specific components like STEM education or vocational or trade education. Or maybe you'll want to tap into some funders that are interested in supporting students with disabilities. Or maybe you're going to go after also companies that might donate some laptops, right? So those are all things that you might think about, but I encourage you to just keep them separate and divvy out your searching into different buckets. It's going to make things so much more easier and not overwhelm yourself initially to start. Number 3, immediate gut checks. So if you don't think that a funder feels aligned at a glance, you are probably correct. And so a question that I like to ask myself is, can you pinpoint at least one sentence on their website or the funding website that describes their proposed work? And so just looking at this sentence that I found from a foundation's website, I can already see it's the perfect fit, right? I can already see those key terms that I was thinking about earlier. I'm actually even seeing terms that I didn't think about, like enrichment or impact on learning, but they actually resonate so well that I'm going to take that into my back pocket and say, oh, I like those terms. And so you might be thinking to me like, Karen, this is obvious, duh, like I know this. But you'll be surprised because I've done this myself where I've come across a funder and I try to justify. I'm like, I can make this work. Like maybe I can write a grant that could fit. But if that thought does come across your mind, I just want you to remember this. Funders will also be using this gut check when they read your application. And to make things even more complex, they're going through hundreds of applications. So if you're not automatically resonating with them like that, then it's probably not going to work out and your chances of success are going to be really low. So again, just keep this in mind and don't push it if you feel like it's not the right fit. Lastly, creating a grants calendar and planning ahead. You might feel inclined to pursue grants whenever you find them. And I've done this as well, where I see a grant and I'm like, all right, I'm going to go for it. But I want you to take a step back and actually think about planning, right? So set yourself up for success with a systematic approach. It is never too early to create a grants calendar. It's going to look something like this. And this is what I like to use, deadlines and really plan out all of your work in somewhat of like a calendar view. Some tips around creating this calendar. Balance your list with a mix of funders who have discrete deadlines and no deadlines. So some of those rolling applications. So what does this mean? You might be seeing some deadlines that you already know about. So plan this out for the next 6 months to a year. And I want you to get to a place where, even for this one, for example, it says August 15, 2022. I used to go and think, okay, that's far away. I can think about that later. But how many of you all have gotten to a place where you're sitting at your desk one day and you're like, oh my gosh, like that deadline that I was thinking about a few months ago, it's already here, right? It comes by fast. And I don't want you to ever get into a place where you lose a deadline. I see some hand raises, Sarah and Ronald. Yes, that happens a lot. And so if you plan ahead and you have a calendar, that will not happen. And you want to minimize the chances of that happening. Now, once you have your calendar planned out for the next 6 months to a year, then you'll be able to block out time and have in your back pocket some of those rolling deadlines, right? Some of those LOIs that are accepted year round. When you have gaps and when you have time, that's when you can go in and apply for those. That way you always have a flushed out calendar and you always have your next list of to-dos. And again, time management prioritization is key, and it's going to help you set yourself up for success. And then
Excellent.
I'm going to pass it on to Joe for the time savers.
So thanks for going over those must-dos, Karen. I hope everyone is implementing those today. And if not, definitely taking note into how to add that in your prospect researching kind of must-do strategy going forward. I'm definitely going to dive into the time savers. And so these are really the questions you should ask yourself as you're assessing an opportunity. And then how to ensure that you're focused on good fit funders. So this is going to be a good way to run through a funding opportunity, make sure, okay, are these going to be the ones that where I can maximize my time most, like we were discussing earlier. And before we do that, I would love everyone to put in the chat, response to this answer or this question, but how much time do you think you spend a week on researching funders? So feel free to throw that in the chat. Again, the question is, how much time do you think you spend a week on researching funders? Yeah, seeing a range of numbers there, 10 to 15 hours, depending on clients, up to 15 hours, 2-ish, depending on bandwidth. Excellent. So definitely an array, and it sounds like everyone has different amount of time devoted to it. But hopefully, these next 4 questions will help you run through your funding list and ensure that everything that you're looking at are going to be good fit funders. So the 4 questions you should be asking yourself are: first, do we have any connections? Connections are going to play a huge role. I know I've been saying that this entire workshop so far, but we'll dive into, I know there was questions around invite only funders, and Karen's going to dive in about how connections as well as other strategies can get you in front of them. The second question you should be asking yourself is, do their past grantees and past awards align with our needs? Third, how open are they to new grantees? So what's the likelihood of them accepting a new grant application? And is it worth your time going through all the effort to actually apply? And speaking of time, the last question you should ask yourself, do we have the resources and time and bandwidth to work with this funder? And does it make sense to actually approach them? So breaking that down further, thinking about connections to a funder, take note of their staff list. And this can be found typically on their websites as well as in their 990 data. And this is going to be a great way where you can see, okay, do you have any connections to them? Does your board have any connections to them? Or are there any other ways that you can create introductions and start to build that relationship? Similarly, review their board and trustee list. And especially if you have upcoming events that you're going to or galas, if you see that one of their board members is going to attend that, definitely make the effort to reach out and connect with them there. Also, look through their 990 data and see if there are any familiar past grantees. Kind of a different approach of getting an introduction and learning about their application process can be through talking to nonprofits that you're either partnered with or that you have a personal connection to. And then lastly, definitely utilize your own staff and your board to try to connect with foundations and share funder ideas with them so that you're not alone. Everyone is in your court hoping that you can also help raise money for your organizations. And so if you have some strategic ways to get in front of other foundations, definitely reach out to your staff and your board to see if there are any ways that they can help you in the process as well. So next question you should ask is, does their past giving and grantees align with your organization? And before even looking at the past grantees and the types of organizations they fund, you should just look at a funder from a geographical giving standpoint. Do they fund in the same areas that your programs and your mission are focused in? And think about that too. There's some national funders that give that say they're national, however, have a specific preference to certain regions. And that's a good way to also save you time and ensure that you're focused on foundations that do give in the region that you're looking at. Next, in thinking about past grantees and their past giving, look to make sure that there are organizations that are similar to yours that they've funded in the past. You can do this, looking at the overall categories of giving that they typically give to, as well as just breaking down the and looking into the 990 for the types of and the names of the organization they've funded. So continuing, the mentoring and education theme that Karen was using as her prior example, want to look and see, okay, do they fund different school systems in the high school range? And then to take that even further, start to look at the size and the grant types that a funder is offering, because this is also going to help ensure that you're focused on grants that align with your needs. And so, if an organization is typically giving lower than you require, or if they're giving in different funding uses, that's also another good way to make sure that you either weed out funders that aren't a good fit or focus on funders that are. And when thinking about that, maybe some funders are more programmatic while others are focused more on education and outreach. And that's a great way to look through that 990 and assess, okay, is this going to be a good fit for our organization? The third question you should be asking yourself, again, are going to be, how open are they to new grantees? So really, what is the breakdown based on their prior giving history of new grantees versus repeat grantees? And this is going to be, another great gut check of, okay, is it even worth my time? Are they going to take my application seriously based on the applicant type? If I'm a new grantee, what's the likelihood of them accepting this? And what we've seen with all the data that we've aggregated at Instrumentl is anywhere from 30 to 50% is about average. Anything over 50% is great to see. And anything under 30%, I would go back to questions 1 and 2 and really think through, okay, do we have connections? If yes, I wouldn't be terribly worried about anything under 30%, as long as you can answer question 2 as well and make sure that they are giving to similar organizations and are giving to similar categories that you are trying to fundraise for your nonprofit. Sometimes funders also give different amounts based on applicant type. And so definitely try to look at that as well. Are new funders getting a different amount than repeat funders? And is that going to help inform my application? Because that's another great way to Karen's point earlier about that funders also go through gut checks. If your ask is well out of the range that they typically give, that's a good way that they usually weed out applications as well. So look to see, okay, are they giving a different amount? And how much should I be requesting as a new grantee? And then also, this can show you too what that relationship can look like as you build the relationship. And don't be afraid to look back at organizations and foundations that do currently fund you and see, okay, how much are they typically giving to their repeat grantees, and can I adjust my ask amount? Am I underselling myself? We've been working with a foundation for however many years, but it looks like they're giving $5,000 more to other educational nonprofits. That's another great way to look at funders as well. And then the last question is really going to be focused on your bandwidth and your time and resources. So definitely always encourage you to look at the length of an application and ensure that you have the bandwidth to actually take advantage and pursue that application itself. Looking at these two examples, the one on the left, it looks a lot lighter weight. It's a quick LOI sent to that email address. Make sure that you align with the foundation fact sheet, while the opportunity on the right is a much lengthier application process. 6-page single space narrative, as well as a single page overview of the proposed team, resumes of current team members. And so really think through, okay, do I even have the bandwidth to approach this foundation, regardless of how likely they are to fund my organization? But you also want to think too, okay, how easily is it to reuse the content that I'm going to be putting in towards this application? Maybe the one on the right, it might take a little bit more legwork, but down the road, it's similar information that is going to be needed for 5 other grants. So definitely need to think through the cost benefit of taking on a heavier application if it's helping you build out templates for that you can reuse as content. And then continuing the theme of bandwidth, also consider the overall requirements from that foundation, because it's not just an application. You also have your reporting requirements after you win the award, and you want to make sure that you have the time and the bandwidth to also be following those, because that can slowly creep into the time that you can spend on prospect researching as well as applying to new grants. And this can typically be found on a foundation's website or a funder's website, but also do not be afraid to ask program officers what their reporting requirements are. They're typically more than happy to answer that and ensure that you have all the information kind of going into the application as well as going after you've submitted it. A good rule of thumb, though, is that if an application is too lengthy, it's usually a good guess that the reporting requirements will also be lengthy. At the end of this workshop, we actually will be offering a freebie that breaks down all of these different the 4 kind of time-saving questions and strategies, so that as you're looking through a funder, you can ask yourself these different things and start to look for those in the 990 as well as other public information. So stick around. We'll definitely let you know how you can access that freebie. Just wanted to make a quick plug because it is really focused on these time-saving pieces. And then I know that now, Karen, after I've gone through the time saving, Karen's going to dive into the more advanced kind of prospecting tips and how to take it to the next level, especially around invite-only funders.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive in. I've already been seeing some questions about how to approach invitation-only funders and what else can I do. So in this next section, I will be talking about those things. What can you do beyond open opportunities, right? Once you feel like you're good at open opportunities, you've been applying to things, you've been successful there, it's time to get more creative, right? And start to think about other ways to prospect for other funders. So today I'm going to be talking about 2 fundraising strategies outside of open grant opportunities, right? Before I do that, I have a poll that I want to launch really quickly. And for those of you who are coming in, thank you, welcome. But also here's another poll for everyone just to think about. Can you name at least 2 other nonprofits that are doing similar work to yours? And have you ever come across a suitable foundation only to realize that they don't take applications? And this has happened a lot to me. I'm assuming that this happens a lot to other people. So yeah, and then I'm gonna share the results really quickly. And yeah, wow, a lot of people. All right, so just so you can see, yes, it seems like this is good that you can name at least 2 other nonprofits that, I'm gonna share the results with you really quickly. It looks like everyone can name at least 2 other nonprofits. That's great. I'm gonna show you today how to use that to your advantage. If you can think about other nonprofits that are similar to yours. And then number 2, have you ever come across a suitable foundation only to realize that they don't take applications, right? That's always a problem and it's always super frustrating. So we'll be talking about that today in this next section. All right, so as I mentioned, 2 things that we're going through today: looking to see who is funding similar organizations in your community, and number 2, tapping into funders that align with you, but do not necessarily have open opportunities or even websites. So I'm going to dive into the first part. I asked that question because I wanted to see and make sure that everyone even knows other organizations that are doing similar work, because you can tap into that. If you don't, or if you want to look for more nonprofits that are doing similar work, start building out a list. So conduct a landscape analysis to look at other organizations and in your community that are doing similar work or serving similar populations. And so a couple of ways you can do this. Google, right? Google is always our best friend. can always use those terms that you were thinking about right in the very beginning when I was talking about brainstorming, and then use that to search for other organizations that are doing similar things or have similar programs. Another way you can do this is by going to your funders, right, looking at their grantee lists, because you might be able to see other organizations or other grantees that those funders are also funding that might be similar to yours. Next step, if you haven't already done this, find out who funds them. And so the challenge with this is that nonprofits do not necessarily have to report this on their 990s. They don't report who's giving to them. And so this is going to be a little bit trickier to find, but take advantage of their websites and annual reports, right? A lot of times you'll see websites of nonprofits where they say, donate to us, and then you can jump in and see like, these are our other sponsors, or they'll have annual reports published about all of their work and all of their donations and all their funders. And so take advantage of that and see who else funds them. I'll show you in a little bit how Instrumentl does this. We take that information and we give you a quick snapshot of who is funding those nonprofits so that you can jump in right away and take a look at those foundations. For this example, you can already see there are 3 family foundations, and that leads me to my next point. How do you develop strategy to tap into funders that do not have open opportunities or do not have websites, right? These are going to be the invitation only funders. I'm going to jump right into here, and I'm going to start throwing out some tips and strategies that have worked for me and that I have learned throughout the years. So first of all, use the same strategies for qualifying funders with open opportunities. So this is taking what Joe and I were talking about, making sure that you do your research and you know these funders before you even go forward, right? Review their openness to new grantees, look at their median grant amount, make sure you know their funding interest areas and that it actually matches what you're looking for. And then of course, types of grants. If you're looking for general ops, but they have never funded a general ops grant, then maybe you know that, okay, maybe it's not the right fit for me. Fully understand the funder prior to approaching again. And I can't stress how many times I've seen people just approach without actually understanding their funder. And so you have to take all those tips that we were mentioning earlier still, even though they are invitation only funders. And then, as some of you may know, connections and relationships with these funders are key, and they will help you prioritize the most approachable prospects. And then you might also be surprised at the connections you didn't know you had. So yes, this is key, but also thinking about what are some ways that you can build out these connections or discover these connections, right? So my first step is to gather a list of these funders, of these foundations and the staff, and then find connections by asking your current donors. So if you have warm relationships with current foundations or individual donors, don't be afraid to ask them, especially if you know them well and you have a warm relationship. Say, hey, do you know this foundation? Or do you know, it doesn't have to be like, can you can you ask them to give to us? It's more so like, can you make an introduction, or do you know their process of giving, right? Tap into your board's relationships. So share these lists with your board as well and see if they know any names that come up that kind of brainstorm some ideas with you. See if you're connected to any of their grantees, right? So, and that's going to lead me to my next page, or my next point is, if you have any connections with these invitation-only funders, grantees, you might be able to gain some deeper insights into their funding process. So don't be afraid to ask. Especially if you see like, oh yeah, I recognize the Boys and Girls Club in this city, and I know that staff member there, I'm going to go ask them. And you can reach out with just a very simple email, something like this that I've used in the past. Something very simple like, hey, I came across this foundation. I think that could be a great fit for us, given that they've funded education or whatever subject area it might be. I noticed your organization was funded by them recently. Would you be open to sharing any advice or insights into their funding process? So again, don't be afraid to reach out. The worst thing that could happen is they ignore your email or they say no, but the best thing that could happen is that they actually either tell you, like, this is how we were able to engage them, or they can say, hey, here's the name to the program officer that I work with. And so that would be a great scenario. And that happens sometimes. You might be surprised. Next, a good reputation is priceless. And so just to reiterate, this is a relationship-driven strategy, which means this is a long-term strategy. So don't be frustrated if you're not seeing results right away or if you're not getting a response. You can do other things to make sure you're ready also before approaching. You can make sure that you are expanding your visibility in your community. So make sure you publicize your good work. Make sure that your website is tightened up, that you're networking out there and going to events. Make sure your social media is up to date. And so if these funders ever come across your website, you want to make sure that they're seeing the best of and all of your good work and everything that you're doing in the community. Lastly, in this section, look for program officers or content experts. And so, you know, a lot of people ask me, you know, if I'm going through a staff list, who do I contact, or like, who is the best person here to contact? And especially with bigger foundations, you might see program officers or content experts. And this is actually a good sign. This means that the foundation has usually tapped these people or hired these folks on to help lead their strategy and to help lead you know, their grant making, right? And so these are the folks to look out for. If you see a lot of program officers, that means that they're probably thinking a little bit more strategically than say your very small family foundation that only just gives to people they know, right? And so take advantage of those people on a staff list, and they're probably going to be your best chances of success there. So once you get to a point where you decide you want to reach out, I do have a couple of tips for you. Number one, be respectful of their boundaries and also come from a place of genuine learning or partnership. And so it goes to say, if someone says, do not send emails or do not reach out to us, don't do it. You don't want to make a bad impression. Again, goes back to make sure you have a good reputation and don't ruin that just by not following the rules. There are other things you can do besides sending that email if they tell you not to email them. And then also come from a place of learning or partnership, you know, which I'll talk about how to make that ask. And the key here is don't make the ask. And I'll talk about that. Acknowledge your giving interest and alignment. So show them you did your research, you know, don't just send an email with no personalization. Actually do your research and then acknowledge their giving interests or where they're at. And so that they are like, okay, they've done their research. At least they can kind of parse out the ones that haven't done their research and ones who actually know what they're talking about, right? So it's a little bit easier. And now, as I was saying, this is your time to build a relationship. Your approach should not be to ask for funding. Your initial approach should not be to ask for funding. I know that sounds very counterintuitive, but the idea here is that, again, this is a relationship and you don't just you know, when you want to say hi to somebody, you don't, you know, can you give me money? It's not how it works. But instead, there are other things you can do. So maybe you invite them to your event, right? And that's pretty, you can't really lose there. Either they say yes or no. They can ignore your invite if that comes. Ask questions. It's okay to be curious and ask about their foundation or what their strategy is. Share a success story. So whether or not it's send them to your webpage, or, you know, just telling them about an event that you just had, which might actually make them want to come to your next event. And also position yourself as a resource, right? So tying back to the content experts, the program officers, they're usually really aware and they know the space very well. That's usually why they're hired on. And so if you can come from a place of like, hey, you know, wanted to get your ideas on this, and I'm also an expert in this field, you can leverage yourself and position yourself as a partner and as a resource. And I think they'll respect that, and they'll maybe look to you for some advice, or even just open up the doors to another kind of conversation, which will eventually lead to an ask that you can make later on. There's a lot that I unpacked there. And yes, there's a lot of information about invitation-only foundations. And so again, at the end of this workshop, I will be sharing our slides. And so I encourage you to check out this link to our blog that's going to talk a little bit more about invitation-only foundations, in addition to a template that you can use as well. I'm going to hand it off to Joe for some learning takeaways.
Excellent. So in the first half of this workshop, we've really focused primarily on, advancing kind of 3 different strategies to advance your prospecting research. Kind of the first one being those 4 must-dos. So your 4 key steps to getting started with prospecting. And remember, those were brainstorming key terms and keywords to look out for, your immediate gut checks, what you should be thinking through as you're looking at foundations and grant opportunities, being aware of discrete and rolling deadlines and creating that calendar so that you're not just going after, the first grant that you see, the first grant you see, and kind of being more strategic on your calendar as a whole. And then breaking your search down into more specific and individual search areas using those key terms. The next thing we talked about were those time savers. So the 4 questions to ask while prioritizing funders, and we'll share that freebie with you as well. So you can kind of have that on hand. So as you're looking at different funders, you can run yourself through those 4 key questions and make sure that they're aligned. And then lastly, really Karen just went through those next level strategies and ways to go beyond open opportunities. So hopefully those were great ways to really start thinking more strategically about invite-only funders and how to build those relationships and break down those doors. And there are several different ways to find a lot of this information that we discussed today. You can use Google, you can go to funder websites, you can look at their annual reports, you can go to 990 data from GuideStar, the IRS. There are other paid databases, but what we find is that Instrumentl is the easiest option for that. And we're going to spend this next half of kind of going through how to leverage the strategies that we just talked about in Instrumentl itself, and then making sure that everyone is set up with active accounts so that you can practice these over the next 2 weeks.
Awesome. I'm going to dive into Instrumentl really quickly, just to, for those of you who are very new to Instrumentl, just talk about why this platform is a preferred platform for many grant writers and nonprofits. And so just a show of hands, how many of you guys prospect research with multiple tabs up, whether it's like a window for the foundation website, or a spreadsheet, you got your GuideStar going on? Yeah, I see a lot of hands up. I used to have like 2 screens just for all my prospecting work, right? Spreadsheets, 990 data, going through hundreds of pages of 990s. So yeah, it can be, Sarah, Mark, Amanda, Melissa. It's time consuming, right? And so Instrumentl is great because we bring all this together in one place, right? Prospecting, tracking, management, which ties into all the things that Joe and I were teaching earlier, right? Getting yourself organized, making sure you're streamlining all of your work. Instrumentl aggregates all public and private funding sources. So we work with corporate, foundation, and government funding. 990 reports and foundation reports are all in one place and at your fingertips, including advanced data and insights on funders. So as we were mentioning earlier, you want to know how open a funder is to new grantees, right? And you can't see that by just looking at a 990. So we actually take that data and parse it out and analyze it for you so that you don't have to. Our unique matching algorithm continuously pushes good fit opportunities for your organization or for your project. So instead of you having to go out there and continuously look for prospects or do searches every other day or whenever a new project comes out, our algorithm just pushes them to you. So you basically have your own prospect researcher on hand just doing the work for you. And then deadlines are updated automatically. So how many of you guys have, especially in 2020, a lot of programs, a lot of deadlines changed or they moved, right? And so we'll always let you know, I see some hands up, that these deadlines will be, we'll notify you when these deadlines change so that you won't lose those. And then tasks, notes, and documents are all stored year by year. So this comes into play again with the strategic thinking, the planning. You might be in here year over year and be able to go back in and see historical applications that you submitted, things that you've been awarded, things that maybe were declined, so that you can kind of work off of that again. So that's also really important, and Instrumentl has all that for you. So just to dive in, I'm really excited to announce, some of you may already know this, that we have new Plus Plan features. We have 3 new things that we just launched: advanced funder insights, recipient profiles, and foundation discovery. We're going to be jumping in right after this and diving into Instrumentl and showing you all of these things. And we are also, to celebrate our launch, we are giving everyone here access to a 2-week free trial of the Plus plan, as well as a special discount code for the Plus plan at the end of this. So stay tuned. We'll be diving into this in the second part of our workshop to show all these features. And the Advanced Funder Insights is going to be those really juicy insights around openness to new grantees. The recipient profiles is basically reverse searching, looking up other nonprofits, seeing who funds them. And then foundation discovery is going to be we're going to be matching you to funders that maybe don't have open opportunities and are maybe invitation only family foundations, right? So those are all of our 3 new features. I'm gonna do just a quick check-in. We're gonna have a fuller Q&A at the end of this, but I want to see if there are any just timely questions that I can answer really quickly, or Joe and I can help answer. So Will, is there anything that's on deck that I can answer? Maybe just a couple of questions?
One of the questions that came up earlier was how important is a social media presence and what sorts of posts should be created if just starting out?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is very important, especially now in this digital age where even events, right, are not in person anymore and they're online. And so I think it's actually really important. And I think even, a lot of people underestimate the power of social media. And so it's great for showing off your work. What are you doing? Bring in experts to help write some content for you, whether it's just like opinions or the work that you're doing, showcasing your events. And then also it's a way for you to kind of, if you haven't already, if you're just getting started with a nonprofit, you want to make sure you have a really good, like a concept of what you're doing, your impact, right? Use data to make sure that people know what you're working on, what the solution is, and what impact you're having in the community. But also make it succinct so that it's readable and that anyone that can come across your website or your social media pages can just see some of those things quickly, and also, of course, link to your website as well so they can get a fuller, more in-depth version of everything on your social media pages. But yeah, social media is great, and it's also great for connecting and building out your network as well.
Another question is, when would you use the phone? How many times would you reach out before moving on to the next funder, especially when you're just mostly using email?
Yeah, the phone is tricky because it can feel invasive, right, to some people. And so I like to start with email, right? And then the phone is great if that connection is built. But it's also worth trying, but don't feel discouraged if no one's picking up or if you're getting some misses there. What was the second part of that question, Will? I don't know if I answered it.
When would you move on from a funder? So maybe you've used the phone and the email. When is it time to kind of move on to the next opportunity?
Yeah, I think if you've tried, maybe send like 2 emails, right? One initial email, maybe follow up a week later. And then also a phone call if you have a phone number. At that point, I think it's okay to move on, but I would say, and I'll show you a little bit later, don't forget about them completely. Like you can revisit them at a later time, or you can, when an event comes up that you're hosting and you're like, actually, I want to invite so-and-so that never responded to me. So I would say actually never give up unless they give you an explicit no, right? But keep them in your back pocket. Don't completely lose them on your radar. Just move on to the next one, but keep them in your pocket.
Cool. Yeah, that's all we've got for now.
And just jumping in kind of on the phone question as well. Response rates and answers, especially to unknown numbers, is really low. So one, it's definitely a good strategy, but hard to get in front of people. So don't feel discouraged, to Karen's point about not connecting. It's typical to like only connect with about 5% of people that you're calling. But definitely would also encourage you to make sure that you do your research beforehand, so that you do come in well prepared, well informed about the person you're calling as well as their foundation. And usually phone's a great way when you have a specific ask. So like if you have an event, if you're trying to invite somebody there, usually that's a much easier way to get a warm response as opposed to calling without a specific plan. And then another good strategy on the phone too, after you've done your research, if you have sent an email, leaving a voicemail, kind of talking about yourself, why you're calling, what the purpose, and like what you're hoping to do when you connect, but also just pointing to your email. So it's a good way just to get in front of somebody, even if they don't answer, leaving that voicemail to point towards your email, to hopefully get a response there.
Yeah, great tips. Any other questions, Will? Did you say that was it for
Nope,
now?
that's it for now.
Awesome. All right, so right now we're going to take a quick 5-minute break. Actually, Joe, go ahead and explain while I set up the link.
No, you're totally fine. So we're actually going to take a quick 5-minute break. We will come back at the top of the hour. So maybe a 6-minute break. We'll start back at the top of the hour. Karen is going to put these instructions into the chat. So if you're a new user in this 5-minute break, please create your account using this link that she just added in the chat. If you're a previous trial user, so this will look like when you click on the link, if you're a new user. If you already have had a trial with Instrumentl, go back to instrumentl.com and log into your account. We've actually reactivated it during this call. So feel free to go back to instrumentl.com, log in, and make sure everything is set up as it was before. And then customers similarly log back in. We've added the Plus Plan trial to all of your accounts as well until next Wednesday. But if you're having any issues as you're setting up your account or getting back into your account, please put them in the chat and we'll help you through during this break. But we're going to go on mute. We're going to go get some coffee and we will be back at the top of the hour. So at 2 o'clock Eastern, 11 o'clock Pacific, and everything in between. And again, if you have any issues as you're setting up your account or getting back in, feel free to message us in the chat. Awesome, everybody. So 3 more minutes before we jump back in here and I dive into Instrumentl. So again, if any questions, feel free to drop them in. And reminder too, we'll be letting you know about our discount code for the release of these new features at the end of this workshop. Awesome, everyone. One more minute before we dive back in here. Excellent. So I'm going to take over the screen now, and we're going to just dive into my account within Instrumentl. And Karen, can you give me a thumbs up to make sure you're seeing everything here on my screen? Excellent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through setting up a project for everyone that already had a trial. You've already gone through this process. So feel free to follow along on my screen. For all new users, if you want to, I'll make sure to do this slowly. So if you want to jump back and forth, to listen to me about what I'm saying about setting up a project and doing it on your own screen, you can then, we'll dive into the matches and prospecting tools after this so that you can kind of see what that looks like on your end. And feel free to use the chat if you're having any issues in this project setup. But perfect. I'm going to title this one Advanced Prospecting Workshop 2. And when we build a project, what a project really is within Instrumentl is going to be a saved search. So the project name can be anything to remind yourself or your team about what you're saving and what program you're looking to fundraise for with this search. And so I'm going to mimic this off of a nonprofit I used to work for in the Denver area. So applicant type, I'm going to say nonprofit. Would you like to see grants specific for faith-based organizations or programs? I'm going to say no. Again, this is dependent based on each organization itself. When I hit save and continue, we're now going to go to the project details. And this is the meat and potatoes of what drives your search results. And so the 3 criteria that our algorithm uses to match you to grant opportunities are going to be location, fields of work, and funding uses. And so again, for new users that are going through this on their own, please just follow along, jump into your project details, and put in the location where your program will actually be facilitated and the areas that you're serving. So for myself, I'm going to say that my project takes place within the US and in the Denver County area. I'm going to say Denver County. I encourage everyone to get as specific as possible. And in doing so, what this is going to show me, it's going to show me local grants to Denver. It's going to show statewide grants for Colorado. It'll also show national grants. So if there are certain counties that you're working in within a given state, I always recommend to get as specific as possible, just to ensure you're seeing only opportunities that apply to the counties that you work in. Awesome. So for fields of work here, this was focused around youth development leadership and youth services. I'm also going to add in here children's health and nutrition, because this is kind of one of the programs that I had worked with in the past, kind of focused around using a local farm as well as kind of a local garden and a kitchen to develop children in the area and teach them about healthy living and to help with children's health. You can create or you can add a minimum and maximum, and in the min max, this is a way to further narrow your scope. So for new users, I would recommend not adding this yet to see the broadest a range of grant opportunities. For current users, think about maybe going back, and if one of your projects has a lot of matches, you can always use this to narrow that scope in further. And then the last thing, sorry, let me move Zoom out of my way. The last thing that's going to drive your search results will be your funding uses. And so for funding uses for this program specifically, it's going to be around general operating, education, outreach, and project and program. And so This is a way, I know Karen was talking about this before, to kind of bucket into and focus on specific program areas. So this is going to be one program that I'm going to create a project for. Excellent. So Kay, I'm seeing that your field is not listed. You were saying preservation of historic buildings. Try a few different keywords and different terms, kind of like Karen was saying, what you can do in your project setup as well in the fields of work. And let me jump back into another one that I can show you. So when I hit edit project, if I go back to this, you can hit select fields of work. There's also this browse category. And so you can scroll through different options or use one keyword. So if I put it in historic here, there's historic preservation. Excellent. Well, perfect. I'm gonna hit save and exit. And this is our, so every project, the way that your Instrumentl is gonna organize your saved searches is all your projects will be on this left-hand side. So you can see I have 5 different projects built out here. Each one is gonna have its separate matches section and tracker. And so the matches section is going to be where we connect you to active grant opportunities and where you can do your project research further. And so looking at this, the initial amount of grants that we found for this project itself is 254 active grant opportunities. And you can see it's a mixture of rolling deadlines and discrete deadlines, just like Karen was saying, as you're thinking about building out your long-term strategy. We have these 3 different tools here that you can use to further adjust the sorting and filter to filter the scope of your search results even more. A nice thing with Instrumentl too is that every project you create is going to be a dynamic search. So we're going to be updating deadlines on your behalf if they change. As we find new grant opportunities that match your search criteria, we'll be adding them in here as well. And that's that new status that certain grants get. You can filter based on funding use and funder type. You can also use the search bar to focus in on different keywords. And so I'm going to focus on Colorado. I really want to focus on local grants and try to find, Denver County grants as well as Colorado statewide grants to help fund this project. So I'm going to use this search bar to further search in Colorado. So of the 254 grants, there are 66 that are focused that are either local or statewide for Colorado. And so looking at these grants here, I'm going to click into Caring for Colorado. I can see on the right-hand side, all right, they're focused on youth development, children's leadership. I'm going to do the quick gut check. Think about location, think about those key terms, and I'm going to scan through this opportunity itself. And to Karen's point, see if there are certain buzzwords or keywords that pop out that are going to make sure that they align with this program. Positive youth development, skill building opportunities, supporting youth development, healthy, inclusive, affirming, promoting youth health. Again, focus of this program for the sake of the example is going to be around youth health. So excellent. So right now I'm seeing some great buzzwords and key terms that I think apply to my current program. What I'm going to do next, if you see this 990 snapshot, it means that they filed their 990 electronically, and we're able to parse out that data into a more digestible fashion, all within Instrumentl. And so you're not going to be having to jump to multiple different tabs. You don't need to have multiple websites pulled up like a GuideStar. All of your prospect research from your must-dos to your time savers can all be done right here in Instrumentl. So when I click on this View 990 report, I'll see a snapshot of their most recently filed, 2020 990. I can see their median grant amount, their average grant amount. That's within scope of what we're trying to fundraise for this program. I can also see the key people. So I'm, my initial question, do I have any connections? Let me look through this. And excellent. I'm actually connected in the Denver area to Connie Rule. So I'm going to take note of that. And I know I'm connected with her, so I'm just going to keep that in my notes right there. So immediately, okay, that's a great connection to have. She's a vice chair, and I'm going to make sure to reach out and learn a little bit more about this specific grant itself for the Caring for Colorado Foundation grant making. I'm going to look at their key financial stats. And again, like I was saying before, I want to look at their assets, and look, they have been consistently giving over the years, and their giving amounts have increased. So they're still actively giving. And then this plus plan feature, this is going to show an aggregated example of the amounts that they typically give based on the last 3 years. So as opposed to just looking at 1,990, I'm now seeing this calculation over the last 3 years to help further inform how much I should be requesting. And I always encourage looking at the median, because the median is going to not be skewed by any outliers, unlike the average. So when you're thinking about, especially for a grant like this that has an unspecified amount, think about, okay, look at the median here when you're thinking about how much you should be requesting. And I always like to look at multiple years as well, because 2020, as everyone knows, really shook up the giving landscape with COVID. And so, their median for 2020 could be very different compared to all of their prior years of giving. So that 50 is probably a better guess, depending on if they're, still focused on their COVID giving amounts. And then I'm going to, ask myself, okay, do they give in Colorado? Geographically, I obviously use this filter to filter down to Colorado. So they do give in the Colorado area. I'm then going to start looking at organizations that they've given to in the past. So this is a list of all their past grantees, the year they gave, the amount that they gave, and then the purpose of that giving. So I'm going to look through here and see, okay, do they have anything, brighter, healthier future for kids, anything around the youth, children with complex needs? Okay, excellent. So it does look like they give into, focus around youth development as well as kids. Excellent. So that passes that gut check. Then I'm going to look and remember, ask myself, how open are they to accept new grantees? And so looking at the last 3 years, the breakdown of new grantees versus repeat grantees is that 33%. And so that's within the range of 30 to 50% of the average giving to new grantees from private foundations. And the fact that I have a connection already, or I know I have somebody I can reach out to, is also going to help with my foot in the door to this organization and for this grant opportunity itself. And then right here, this openness to new grantees based on grant amount, this is going to further help inform, as a new applicant, how much should I be requesting based on my applicant type. And then another point I want to drive home as well, looking at this information outside of just assessing new grant opportunities, it's always going to be really good to also look at your current funders and see, okay, is there a gap in how much I'm receiving, and can I start to ask for more, especially with 2022 coming up around the corner. So as you start to build out that long-term strategy. The last piece I'm going to look at is going to be the categories of giving. Where do they mainly focus? Youth development, I see that in their top 10 categories, as well as human services. So I can then further click into this and see, okay, what areas do they focus in that youth development space? And does it make sense for me to be reaching out to them? I think it does. So what I'm going to do is, and a great aspect of Instrumentl as well, so you have these 254 grant opportunities. I'm going to hit this save button. And what it does is it's a way that you can start to save grants to your tracker and build out that long-term calendar that Karen was talking about before. So when I hit save, it's going to ask what project I want to save it to. I'm going to save it to this, Workshop 2 project. We actually remove it from your matches section, and now it's in the tracker. And the tracker is essentially a live spreadsheet that we build out on your behalf. We'll start to send you, I'll start to receive email notifications about the grants that I've saved to this tracker based on their deadlines. And then you can still actually research all of the grant opportunities themselves right in this tracker within this record. I have this notes section where I can keep my notes, the status of me, how I can move the grant through the pipeline depending on where it is. And then this task section is how I can create separate reminders for myself to let myself know, okay, when do I need to get a budget? When do I want to have my first draft for my application? And then after I've won a grant, I can also use this to create reporting deadlines. So I'm going to jump into my master tracker really quick to kind of show what that looks like once you have several grant and opportunities saved in here. So you have these different tabs from researching. These are all the grants that I've saved that I want to research further. These are all the applications that I have out there, whether they're planned, submitted, or awarded. And similarly, Again, the organization that I have worked with in the past was a food organization, kind of focused on nutrition and food access and security. So was awarded this grant, food access and hunger. I can have all my notes for 2021 in here, how much I requested, when my submission goal was. Oh, it looks like I have a report coming up soon. What I also can do is I can actually duplicate this record. So for next year, I know that this was a great grant for me in 2021, and I want to pursue this again next year. I'm going to keep it in 2022. And that submission goal is automatically updated based on the foundation's funding cycle for 2022. So when I hit save, now you're going to see that I have this grant already saved in here in this record as well. So I can jump back and forth between 2021 and 2022. But those are ways that you can save grant opportunities from your matches section into the tracker. Now, Karen's going to dive into a couple other useful tools to really take these advanced prospecting features even further.
Awesome. Thank you. So I want to point everyone to, if you're earlier I was talking about looking up other nonprofits that are similar to doing work that doing similar work in your organization, or maybe you want to look up just your funder, right? So Joe, if we can go into the quick find, I want to show everyone what this looks like. You can look up a funder or a nonprofit at any time outside of the matches. So let's start by saying, all right, I know Charles Stewart Mott Foundation is a funder of mine. So I want to see who else do they give to and who might be of interest to me. And I want to kind of do some reverse searching here. So you can look up Charles Stewart Mott. At a glance, you'll be able to see all of the open opportunities related to Mott. They're a huge foundation, so they have things in education and environmental work. You can scroll down in here and see everything that we just showed you earlier in terms of insights, right? They're giving. And I'm going to jump into the past grantees because, again, I really want to look at to see who else do they fund. So if we want to, let's hone in on Colorado, right? Let's see, who does this foundation give to in Colorado? I have no idea besides us. And so I'm looking through this and I'm thinking, oh, interesting. There is that Civic Canopy one. They do some after school work and they fund some programs for youth. So then I'm going to click on that and say, all right, this is an organization that's similar to mine. Now I want to see, okay, who else funds Civic Canopy, right? So this is how you'll be able to do your reverse searching back and forth and be able to find other funders. So if you scroll down here into the past awards received, you'll be able to see, all right, who has given to Civic Canopy? And then you'll look in here and you'll say, oh, wow, there's all these other foundations like the Colorado Health Foundation or the David and Laura Mirage Foundation or the Zoma Foundation, right? So this is where you'll be able to look at other grantee or other funders and then click into them so that you can see and do some more reverse searching this way. So highly recommend checking out the quick find. If you have a list of other nonprofits that you're interested in seeing who funds them, you can use the quick find to look them up. And that feature is also a new feature on our Plus plan as well. Awesome. And then I also want to talk about invitation only funders and what does that look like, right? So this is also going to be included on our new Plus plan, the ability to see other funders outside of open opportunities. So these are going to fall under the funder matches. This is currently in beta mode and we just launched this. And so if you click into that, you'll see funders or foundations that don't have open opportunities, or perhaps they don't even have websites. So these may be maybe Denver-based family foundations, right? And we're still taking into consideration, your location as well as your fields of work, so that you know that these foundations are aligned and they have made grants to organizations in the Colorado area. And so, yes, then you're thinking, all right, these are actually aligned with me. And then we want to maybe scroll in here and we can, check out some funders this way and then continue to do your research in here, right? Just because they are invitation only doesn't mean that you shouldn't look at who they've given to. You definitely want to look and see, you can see the application information, whether or not they state on their 990s that they are invitation only. And then you can also see here the same exact information that we saw earlier in those open opportunities, right? Who are they giving to? Where are they giving geographically? What is their median grant amount? All the different grantees that they have are listed here in one place so that you can do all of your research before you start or think about approaching them. And then, yeah, so right here, this is really important, looking to see how open they are, right? With invitation only funders, you'll see probably a smaller amount of giving to new grantees, right? And that's because they don't have open applications. So you definitely want to keep this in mind. You don't ever want to approach a foundation if you see that every single grant that has they've been given or they've giving are to repeat grantees, right? So you can see there's some, I don't know what year that is, but there are some years where they did give a lot to new grantees, right? And perhaps more recently, it has kind of trailed off. And so, yeah, just to give you an idea of, again, how open they are, how many new organizations do they fund every year, or maybe they don't, and you want to be able to prioritize them. Cool. So, and then below that, you'll also see the median grant amount, as well as what Joe was talking about, new grantees versus repeat grantees, and NTE codes in case you want to see, well, yes, what are the subject areas that they're actually funding? Same thing that we were looking at with the open opportunities. So hopefully this has all given you a better idea of, our Plus Plan features, as well as just Instrumentl in general. And we're excited to kind of get you in there into your free trial. If this is brand new to you, would love to, can schedule some time with Joe and I to go over this quickly. I know we went through a lot today. And so if you want a more personalized consult, we'd be happy to jump in with you and we can talk about how to do that a little bit later. All right, so looks like we have 10 minutes left. So I do want to dive back in and answer some questions if possible. I'm gonna share my screen again and go into our Q&A session. So Will, do we have any other questions that have come in since then? Or if there's any other questions now, feel free to pop them in the chat and we can try to answer it for you.
Yeah, no new questions thus far, but folks might be digesting what you just said, so we'll give them a moment to see if any come in.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Thanks everyone for sticking it through. If you have a question, continue to pop it in there, but we'll dive right into the next part, which is going to be the next steps. And so if you would like to share your feedback with us, you can do so. And we're going to post a link in the chat. Go ahead and share your feedback with us. And we're going to be sharing a freebie with you that we talked about earlier. This is our ultimate no-go grants evaluation tool. So this will kind of help you with those different it's basically a big checklist for you to think about whether or not a funder is a good fit for you. So we've compiled all this into a really great document. And so check that out by going to our link and sharing your feedback. And then if you haven't already, hopefully you have in the last 20 minutes, creating your account with us, or if you already have an account, log into your Plus Plan trial and practice everything that we've showed you today. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to us if you're in the Plus Plan. And then thirdly, subscribe to the annual Plus Plan. And I'm going to have Joe take it away to talk a little bit more about our offer.
Yeah, so everyone from new users to repeat users have 2 weeks to explore the Instrumentl again with those Plus Plan features in them. And so definitely want to encourage you to go in now with these kind of new learnings to dive in and think more strategically about all the different funding opportunities in your prospect research. Then we have this fall 21 offer to celebrate our new features. So with the coupon code fall200, and you can use this at your checkout. There's a discount code option when you select the Plus Plan. We're giving everyone that attended today the offer of the fall 200 coupon code. It's $200 off the Plus annual plan and up to 5 users. So that's 2 additional users compared to the normal Plus Plan. And that's for the first 10 accounts that subscribe by December 20th. And so that's December 20th because December 21st is officially the start of winter. So to celebrate our fall release, we're letting all current trials as well as new users have access to this discount code for $200 off. And that's again for the first 10 accounts that subscribe by December 20th. But we will send that out via email as well. Please take note of that discount. So as you're assessing the platform, you can remember that down the road. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us via email. We'll also be following up to everyone for attending via email. We'd love to hear from you. If you would like a personal consultation and kind of strategy deep dive into your own accounts, we would be happy to do that as well. But again, if there are any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, but appreciate everyone coming and taking the time and hopefully learning something new today with Karen and myself.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Yeah, looking through the chat just to see some questions.
Just to reiterate one of the questions that was stated earlier that I think was answered in the chat, but just so that everyone else who may have missed it might be able to get that answer. Will saved funder prospects created during the Plus trial remain in their trackers, even if they don't upgrade after the renewed trial?
Yes, everything that you save, regardless of whether or not you're on a Plus trial, will be saved in your account. So they will be there for you, whether or not you upgrade or you subscribe to the Plus.
Yeah, so definitely encourage everyone to take full advantage of the Plus plan for the next 2 weeks to really, one, start to build out your tracker, but also think through if the plan's right for you. And if not, all of your work will still be saved in your tracker. So don't be discouraged in leveraging Instrumentl over the next 2 weeks.
And just to clarify on that fall offer, Joe, it's 5 users. The slide is a little confusing since it says 5 users and then +2. The base plan has 3, so we're including the 2 free users to get you to a total of 5.
Correct. That's correct. Thanks for clarifying that, Will. Yeah, so it's 5 users total. So that's an additional 2 users to the 3 that is normally included in the Plus plan. So it's 5 users total.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Hopefully we'll chat and connect. If you'd like to chat more, if you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and looking forward to seeing everyone in the trials and trying it out for the next 2 weeks.
And again, don't forget to submit your feedback to receive that free evaluation tool. And I'll leave that in the chat for anyone that missed that earlier.
Thanks, everyone.